Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to Trail Society, produced by our friends over at Feisty Media. I'm your host, Corinne Malcolm, and today's episode is brought to you by our incredible apparel partner, Rabbit. And I can't wait to sit down and chat with longtime co-host, Keely Henninger. You've been away, you've been studying, you've been honeymooning. How are you?
I know, I feel like I'm finally emerging from my hermit hole. Like, the last 2 months have just been absolutely insane. So glad you've been holding down the fort and crushing some of these podcasts with some amazing guests. It's been so fun to listen to. But I'm excited I'm on the other side of it. I do not want to repeat those, 2 months really ever again.
Yeah, so I was talking to another medical student, Kaylee Blevins, who was visiting us this past week, and I was like, oh yeah, Keely took step early to go on her honeymoon, and Kaylee's like, of course she did. She's such a badass. So just again, you just took a huge medical exam, one of many that you'll take kind of in this becoming a doctor journey. You passed, spoiler alert. But just how are you feeling having that one behind you and also having gotten that big exhale and a fun trip on the other side?
Totally. Yeah. It's a really nice feeling to just be done. I think I've heard from a lot of people that the next tests are annoying, but not nearly as annoying as the first one. So that's nice. And I think too, it's kind of like anything, right? You are getting ready for your first race, you're getting ready for your first whatever. The nerves and the stress behind it are so high because you don't know what to expect. And I think that's something that was at play with step one is cool, I feel like I should be ready. All of the, signs are pointing to me being ready, but I actually have no clue what this is going to look like. And I think that part adds a lot of stress that you maybe don't notice. It's simmering in the background. And so, yeah, once I was finished, I feel like you lose 80% of the stress just right away because you're oh, thank goodness I'm done, even though that felt horrible. And then we kind of skedaddled to Costa Rica a couple days later and had just the craziest trip from the get-go. We got stuck in Chicago for 2.5 days. Then we were in, had to basically jump into our trip, in the middle of a travel part. So we just kind of were hustling for a week, it felt like. And then finally got to rest and got to a spot where we were chilling for a little. And I feel like I just lost all of my senses. It was okay, now I should I cry? Should I scream? Now I have time to just chill and come down from this high. And it was really nice, but it was also wow. And then of course the day after we have a very stress-free day, I get the results, which was amazing. It was oh, this is amazing. I didn't know I'd get them this soon. So
that's awesome. I had no idea that you guys got stuck in Chicago on the front end of your trip.
Yeah,
that's
it was so sad.
A bummer.
I know. We missed our chill time on the trip in the beginning, so then we just jumped right into navigating Central American travel, and so it was pretty stressful. But it's okay. It was all good. It was still super fun. It just was, not maybe as we were expecting.
I feel like you and JT are really good at that, though. Or you're I guess we're rolling with the punches.
Totally.
That seems very much within your wheelhouse as far as the trips you guys have taken together.
Totally. Yep. Just rolling with the punches. And we're oh, this is no different than what we've been doing for the past 2 months. We'll just grin and bear it.
And then you're back home. You are in this next phase of medical school where you start rotations, but you guys also have research time built in to the year for many of you. What is that like? What does the next couple months look like?
Yeah, I'm super stoked for the next couple months. So this first 2-week section is a prep for clinicals. So we're just relearning some of the ins and outs of the hospital, doing some practice code blues and all sorts of stuff. So we're ready to rotate, quote unquote, ready as we're going to be. And then I have a 2-week family medicine, reproductive health elective. And then I have 7 weeks of research. So That's stoked.
Crazy.
I know.
You front loaded the niceness.
I did. And then my first rotation is family medicine as well. So my next 3.5 months are clutch.
Are super chill.
Yeah, I'm so stoked. I literally stretched after my run this morning. I was wow, this is luxurious.
I'm not studying 10 hours a day. I can run and stretch.
Yeah.
Look at me go.
It was really nice.
I did see the Instagram story of that, so it's all coming up for me now.
Yeah. How are you doing? How have you been?
Oh, we're good. I feel like race season is really kicking off in the media world. So it's a lot of little bits and bops of work going on. We're getting all of my big Hoka projects for the year kind of squared away. I managed a big project with Renegade Running. I'm wearing our team sweatshirt from this past year.
Nice.
This past year, we've got like iterations of that this year as well. We're bringing women to UTMB from that project. We've got one of the gals is one of the outreach athletes for Western states in June. And then we'll probably have women going back to Kodiak again this fall.
Cool.
And so we're just getting all the budgets squared away so that we can bring those projects to life this year. And that's kind of the ins and outs of what I do beyond my running, beyond my coaching, is I am like in the background emailing people like frantically trying to make sure that we can pull off these community impact projects that ideally at the end of the day bring more women into trail running. So it's been a lot of fun, but this is like the kind of the crunch period before we get to do the actual fun stuff.
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah, I'm excited to see who all shows up for these races.
Yeah, it's going to be, yeah. And then like, obviously I think one of the next times you and I get to talk, we'll get to be like reflecting on like golden ticket races. And that's cool. There's a double header this upcoming weekend at Black Canyon and Tarawera. And I think that I will be actually not there in person. We're in the middle of navigating some fertility health stuff, but I'll get to pleasantly watch it from my couch this weekend. And I'm also looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, the race, especially Black Canyon, is stacked. And just has a lot of like wild cards, you know, like people who've not raced the distance before but are super talented runners. So I'm also excited to watch it, but I'll be watching it from Palm Springs for my sister's batch party. So hopefully fun. I'll get some more sun in my life for the next.
Yeah, you're like, I'm working on tan lines. And speaking of tan lines, you're working on tan lines in new Rabbit apparel. And before we hit record, I was like, what have you been running in recently? Like you were wearing some very bright shorts this morning. So what have you been loving?
Yes, well, I've been loving the tried and true 4-inch, which I wore throughout all of my Costa Rica trip. I brought all three of my pairs. I have two like bright pink ones and one like gray, like confetti cake kind.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I love those shorts. They're so amazing. They have a lot of pockets, so I can put my phone in the zipper pouch in the back, which I feel like is a game changer. But then also you can fit like a folded up plastic water bottle, like a hydro flask in there as well. So I would just run with a flask in my hand, have the phone in my pocket bra, and then, put the bottle in my pouch, and then I wouldn't have to carry anything when I was done. It was great.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then this morning I was running in the like spandex shorts that have a lot of pockets, so those are amazing. And those are like the Speed Leggy 4-inch, and those are some of my favorites as well. And then the Speed Tight is also my newest favorite. I just started running in those. Those are the long tights. They have like really pretty perforated holes that go down the back of the leg. So cool. The tight is just very, very pretty. It has two side pockets like on the thighs, and then it has the zipper pouch in the back of the waistband, and then it has these perforations, and it's just very pretty long tight.
And that's like kind of the theme, I think, with Rabbit right now, is that we're like, oh, pretty. Oh, more pretty stuff. And so it's like there's new colorways out that are, quote, pretty. There's some new patterns that are also, quote, pretty. There's someone actually, I was looking through our DMs, and someone's like, can we get some nice dark colors? Because I am a messy snacker. And they like wanted specifically like a dark green, and like the newest like off track like kind of loungewear is that exact color. Yep. So if you're listening, they made something for you. We didn't know. And then you did not get to be on this meeting because you were busy. You were, I think, in your step exam, actually, when we had the meeting with Rabbit, and we got to see the first looks at the samples that have come in for our new collab line that will come out, I believe, in April. And they are also, quote, very pretty.
I'm so excited to see them.
Yeah. We saw like the renderings from Monica, like the chief brain operator and design creative, I feel like, over at Rabbit back in October. And we were like, wow, these are really cool. And then to see those patterns, because it's a fun pattern, come to life like on actual material, on tops, on bottoms, like it is. Oh, you guys, it's good. And I can't wait to share it with you this spring. So, keep those fingers crossed, but they're going to be live on the website before you know it.
Yeah. And so, because it's not coming out in February, but it will come out soon. You can use the code FEBTRAIL for 10% off for February. And you can get some of the newer fun stuff in the darker colors, so they're snack proof. There's like the dark green, the dark burgundy, all kind of spring vibed colors, but like a little darker hue. They're very cute. And again, just use FEBTRAIL, F-E-B trail, for 10% off for February. And then we'll let you know when our pieces come out later.
Yeah, I always like to say, so hop on over to runandrabbit.com. Yeah. We also have to give a huge shout out to a new sponsor of the podcast. You got to hear about them a little bit, I guess 2 episodes ago, but ProBio has joined the Trail Society family.
Yeah, let's talk ProBio. I love them. We luckily discovered this new all-in-one over the holidays, and we've been taking it for a couple of months now. I have to literally tell JT to not drink all of my stuff. It's comprehensive and foundational nutrition in just one scoop, and we've done it on a very consistent basis, and I really, really love it, and I feel like I'm getting all my nutrition needs. We're huge on consistency over here at Trail Society, as you guys know. So yeah, Corinne, I would love to hear how you're loving it. Are you currently team orange or are you team original with your ProBio?
I am team orange, and I think we talked about this before we signed on, but it is like tang. Like it's this like really smooth, tangy flavor, and I think that's a big deal when it comes to like, what am I taking in the morning? Am I excited to drink this thing? Is it what, like, am I going to be like, oh, take it quick? It's very, very delicious, and I've been looking forward to it. And I'm wondering, Keely, when we started talking to ProBio and you had been the first one to try it, you were all about your morning smoothies. So are you an original or an orange gal?
I'm an OG gal, so original, which I think also has a teeny bit of an orange tang to it. Very, very subtle. But yeah, I throw it in my smoothie. So I do mine post-run, and I'll do oat milk, chocolate protein powder, and then my ProBio. And that's my primo recovery smoothie blend. And I love it. It's my go-to every day now.
Yeah. And so the ProBio Pro Blend is research backed and clinically dosed, has clinically dosed ingredients for immunity support and gut health. You don't want to lose a training block due to being sick. You don't want to struggle with bloating or GI distress on race day. And the Pro Blend is designed to handle that. It's also got this really interesting magnesium in it called Magtin, which is noticeably better for energy and focus. And then they've got BCAAs, which is really huge, I think, particularly for our plant-based athletes or for athletes that are coming up a little bit shy on meeting those daily protein needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or even menopausal athletes. The BCAAs are really good for maintaining muscle mass there. So yeah, we're huge fans. We are obsessed with this new partnership. We love working with the team over at ProBio. And luckily for you guys, Trail Society listeners can now get 20% off or 30% off plus free shipping with a subscription by using the code TRAIL20 at probionutrition.com. Again, that's TRAIL20 at probionutrition.com for your daily nutrition needs. And for a greater impact, switch to a supplement regimen that you'll stick with today.
Yeah. The idea being like, you don't need to take 16 pills. You can take a scoop of this thing and be good. Know that you're covering your bases, particularly when life is a little bit crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've got some news. We're going to talk about some news today as well. It's the Olympics. Although we're recording this on the 10th and it'll come out a week from now, we are peak Winter Olympics. And then we'll have peak Winter Paralympics, which I'm so excited about as well, because friend of the pod, Danny Arovich, will be representing the Team USA in the Paralympics in March. And I'm so excited about that as well. We've got to get her on the podcast for an interview, maybe while she's in Italy even.
That'd be cool.
That would be a dream. She's a little bit busy. She's a very, very busy lady, but it's been a cool games to follow. Thus far, we're early days. We're in kind of the first week of the Olympics, but one of the big stats that has come out is that this Winter Olympics, looking at all the athletes there present, 47% of the athletes at this games are women, which is a big deal. People are really excited about that, but it's 47% women because there is still one winter sport that has no female component to it. And it's actually one of the older Olympic sports. It's Nordic Combined, which has been in the Olympics for 100 years now. And it's a bummer because it was similar to ski jumping.
What
maybe
is Nordic
12
Combined?
Years ago. So yeah, great question. It's not biathlon, which is skiing and shooting, but again, it combines 2 winter Olympic disciplines, and that is ski jumping, kind of like the ski flying thing. They are launching themselves into space effectively off a big ski jump on the huge skis. And then Nordic skiing. So they get ranked from their jump, and then it's almost like a pursuit format race where they are trying to make up deficits on Nordic skis. And there's a relay component and all this kind of stuff. It's a really cool winter sport. But the women haven't been allowed to compete at the Olympics. And there's a long time where they deemed it not safe enough for women to do. Like, they're like, oh, the impact forces of landing. And it's like, well, that's not how like a ramped system works anyway. There are also many other jumping disciplines, moguls, aerials. The downhill racers clear like 150 to 170 feet while they barrel 80 miles an hour down the ski slope. Like, safety might not be the rationale there. And then they always like to use, well, it's not competitive enough. It's not globally competitive enough. But they've also worked over the last decade to make sure that they had a World Cup component, to make sure that they had a World Championship component where they're competing alongside their male national teammates, right? Like the U.S. men's and women's Nordic Combined team are at World Championships together. They have a World Championship event. They're just not allowed in the Olympics. And I laugh when I hear this, like, well, it's not globally competitive enough, but the IOC is the person saying, well, we're not going to give you an Olympic competition, which would maybe continue to inspire more and more girls globally to compete in this event. So it's kind of like it's hamstrung by its own system. And that to me is really frustrating. And one of my friends from biathlon, actually Tara Garrity-Moats, is a Nordic Combined athlete. She left Nordic Combined for biathlon because there wasn't an Olympic pipeline. And this year actually went back to Nordic Combined to kind of get to compete more internationally throughout the entirety of her season. One of the gals that's been highlighted a lot in the media, there's a really cool film out about her right now. I cannot remember her name, which I hate doing. But her brother, for example, is competing at the Olympics this week. And she's like, they grew up doing the sport together. And she would be probably the second or third ranked U.S. woman who would likely have qualified for the Olympics. And again, not getting that opportunity. It makes me sad.
Oh, that's tricky. Yeah.
So
it's interesting that they're citing danger or like unsafetyness, you know what I mean, to like not have it, because you're like watching Eileen Gu like ride backwards and do triple backflips off of jumps. You're like, I think we can handle it.
That man is going 90 miles an hour down the hill. That woman is going 85 miles an hour down the hill. I'm pretty sure. They just like snowboard big air or whatever. Like, it's like, I think they can do Nordic Combined. I'm wondering if you've had any favorite moments, if you've gotten to catch any of the Olympics. Obviously, it's early days and you're a busy lady, but I'm wondering, do you have a favorite winter Olympic sport?
Do I have a favorite Olympic sport in the winter? Ooh, good question. I actually love watching skating, but I haven't watched any of it yet. I just think it's so fast. It's crazy how fast they skate. But I also really like watching the skiing. And so I watched a little bit of like Eileen Gu's run when she got silver. That was really cool. She's like riding backwards mostly the whole time. And then I really I liked the Breezy's gold as well. And I think my favorite Olympic persona right now is Snoop Dogg. Like, he just brings me so much joy. He's such a hype man for everybody. It's kind of amazing. And so, like, I watched some clip that was, like, Breezy's run, and then he was commentating just, like, so stoked, and I thought that was really cool to see. So those were kind of my favorites so far, but I haven't gotten to watch very much of it.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's obviously in a weird time zone, so you're watching replays, or if you're me, you're up at 5 a.m. to make sure you don't miss the action because I'm a nerd. This morning, I did not wake up at 2:35 a.m. to watch the classic Nordic ski sprints because that's a little too early for me. But I was like, I'm not going to look at my phone this morning. I want to be surprised. And I did a really good job. I like got up, made coffee, opened the streaming website for the Olympics, like got to the heats of the classic sprint, which meant I got to be on the edge of my seat as I watched American Ben Ogden win a silver medal in the men's classic sprint. He like had an amazing quarterfinal. He like snuck in as a lucky loser in his semifinal because he got like snuck at the line. So he wasn't top two in his heat. So he had to rely on time. And then he put on such an amazing race in the final. He was the only person who was able to stick with Klæbo, who's like the man of men right now in Nordic skiing. And so I like didn't know what the results were, even though the race had happened like 4 or 5 hours ago. And I like Steven got home from work and we're on the couch like yelling at my computer, like, go Benny, go Benny, go. So first Olympic medal for a U.S. man in Nordic skiing since Bill Koch got a medal 50 years ago.
Whoa, that's amazing. That's got to feel so good.
Yeah. Julia Kern made the women's final, finishing sixth. It was a good day for the Americans and such a cool day for a medal to come home in Nordic skiing.
Yeah, I'd say. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Do you know when Anna and Cam raced?
Yes. They raced towards the end of the Olympics. So the Olympics, I think the final events are on the 22nd, and I think they raced the 19th and the 21st. So right towards the very end. One race will be the individual sprint, and then the other race will be the mixed relay. And I can't remember what order they go in, but they've got time. They went to the opening ceremonies, and then they've been in training camp mode until they go back to Bormio. Maybe is the skimo location for the races.
Cool.
So they'll be later in the games.
Okay, cool. I'll tune in for that for sure.
Yeah, end of next week, basically.
Aw.
I love it. Okay, you got a little bit of news that you wanted to share as well.
Yeah, so there's a new kind of private practice endeavor coming out of Harvard. Dr. Kate Ackerman decided to start a private female athlete center called WHSP, Women's Health and Sports Performance. And it's kind of what we've been envisioning for a while. It's a very much an integrated, holistic view of female athletes where they have, like primary care physicians, nutritionists, psychologists, PTs, strength training coaches, all under one roof. And their basically goal is to serve like the athletes of the Boston area to give them one hub to do all of the needs they need as female athletes, which is really cool. Would love to create one of those one day too, right? And so they had, Alicia Montano came out, Molly Huddle came out. They had a nice launch party about a week ago to kind of break the tape. And it's just really cool to see this kind of take shape. I know she'd been thinking about doing it for a while. And it came through with like a lot of private funding money, specifically the WUSI Alliance also funded this. And it's just cool to see the money backing, female athletes right now. I don't think anybody in female sports, 20, 30 years ago would have thought that we'd be in a space now where we can have these amazing clinics pop up that are just serving female athletes, right? It's really amazing.
Yeah, it's also super interesting that it is kind of a clinical hub for. I think we were kind of all waiting to see what Kate Ackerman would do type of thing. Like, would she how clinical would she be? How research focused would she be? And it's interesting. I think there'll be some kind of I wouldn't be surprised if research comes out of this group as well, or if they partner on research projects. But then there's that interesting difference between private institutes and private funding of these kind of performance centers versus the traditional NIH and K grants and that kind of stuff. That they are obviously in one is academic and one is clinical and in this case performance driven. But it's interesting where those overlap and where those differ. And as women's sports science and sports performance development kind of continues to take shape over the next couple decades, I'm curious to see where that goes and what happens. And that is just kind of a continual interesting thing, and the flexibility and freedom you have maybe in this setting versus the Stanford overlords or the a big academic center in the UK overlords or whatever it might be, being in control of, or having a lot of say in what you're doing.
Totally. And I'm sure she still has a lot of connections at Harvard where she can partner with research, but not necessarily have to be the one, fighting for different fundings for that. But I'm sure anything, there's hoops for them too.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. There's always hoops, but it's cool, and I can see us having more of these hubs. I could see a hub like this in Portland or Denver or Seattle, Minneapolis, places where we've got women's sports teams as well cropping up. San Francisco, right? When it's where did the Valkyrie go? Yeah. Where do the Sirens go for their care?
Yeah. Did you see the Hillsborough? So there's an old Nike building we're turning into female athlete hub for the Thorns and for the Fire, the WNBA team here and the women's soccer team here. It just got announced that it's now considered the Kaiser Performance Center or something like that. So they're actually partnering with docs. So I think it's going to be kind of similar. Again, it's not private as much because it's through Kaiser as well, which is a hospital firm here. But in general, I'm excited to see what comes out.
Kaiser, I think, has done some similar stuff in California as well. I feel like they have a big kind of additional sports med arm that feels like it has its fingers a little bit into professional sports while still being within like the Kaiser system. So that, again, it's an interesting like private public medical facility that we'll just have to keep our eyes on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, well, go Ackerman. We'll be following along, watching with bated breath, being like, can we come hang out? That'd be cool. Okay, I digress. We are going to chat. We've got some stress themes going on, and I don't know. I was laughing when I was thinking about this because it's like, well, what do we want to talk about on the podcast? It's like, I don't know. Maybe the fact that we're all like, our nervous systems are going haywire, life stress is high, Hillary's traveling around the globe, you had travel and a huge test. I've got all kinds of life stuff going on while trying to manage a professional workload. And so in episode 119, we talked about that stress is stress, that training stress doesn't happen in isolation, that there's this ecosystem of our daily lives that we are stuck in, controllables and uncontrollables. And that got our brains going, particularly your brain. And I think it was this idea of like, well, that's like the outward presentation of stress, but what is going on beneath the surface? And so I'm wondering, where you want to dig in exactly in that conversation.
Yeah, and it's probably, part to do with my brain being very much invested in step 1 right now, where I immediately go to mechanisms of what's going on and the inner physiology workings of everything. But also, I think when we were noodling what to talk about for this episode, it felt weird to not discuss something around like stress right now, just given the state of the world and how everybody's feeling. It felt weird to kind of ignore that. And since you guys had just had a really great conversation on, stress is stress and all that stuff, I thought it'd be cool to dive into like, well, what is stress? Like, what is cortisol? We hear all this word all the time. Like, do we actually know what it is? Like, how does that relate to athletes? Isn't cortisol like good? All these things. And I think just diving into what cortisol is, how it impacts athletes, how it can impact anybody, and what happens when it's, chronically elevated during times of stress, and that kind of stuff would be really fascinating. And then it happened to coincide with the launch of the 2025 update to the Female Athlete Triad Coalition. They released a new consensus statement, and in it, they do mention some stress. So I was like, okay, let's tie this all together and really just deep dive into that new consensus statement. Let's clarify what the difference is between Female Athlete Triad and low energy availability and REDS, right? Because that's kind of confusing. And then let's really dive into the nitty gritty of cortisol and stress and how that applies to athletes.
I love that we live in a world where we're like, oh yeah, some cortisol good, a lot of cortisol better. No, wait, no, a lot of cortisol bad. It's like this kind of like, whoa. Let's back up. But I did love that you brought this paper up, and it can feel like a little bit of a sidestep from this conversation, but I do think it's really level setting for it in general because it's incredibly practical as well. And you're right, like low energy availability, relative energy deficiency in sport, etc., kind of came on the what do I want to say, coattails of the Female Athlete Triad because they wanted to broaden it out to all athletes, not just female athletes. But we love a consensus statement. It's way better than a narrative review, but it does have a lot of just kind of like things to like dig your teeth into. And so I'm wondering if we can kind of, I don't know, noodle our way into the paper and how they laid out the terms to get us started and then like the changes they made along the way.
Yeah, so the Female Athlete Triad was created back in the 80s. They've released 3 consensus statements up until this point, so this is the 4th one. But the last consensus statement was over a decade ago, so quite some time has passed since the last one. And the Female Athlete Triad originated based off of creating a triangle. So triad means 3. It started as like a triangular visual, basically relating energy homeostasis, so, inadequate energy or enough energy, to reproductive function, so think menstruation, hormone levels, and then to bone health. So those were the 3 kind of pillars of the Female Athlete Triad, with the energy kind of being the stimulator for these defects in reproductive function or bone health. And so, a new consensus statement basically just updates their original hypothesis with, more recent data, more recent findings, to make it more robust. And that's kind of what they did here. And so kind of just from a high level overview perspective, when you look at some of the updates they've talked about in this new paper, they first of all added an adolescent model. which is pretty cool. I think that's really, really important. And some of the things that they added in that regard, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this actually, because I know you were a super competitive athlete, you know, through your adolescent period into your college period, was that the caloric deficit or energy deficit needed to meet the criteria for amenorrhea or low energy was lower than a person that's not in their adolescent years. And so they're basically saying like there's less room to miss calories as an adolescent athlete than when you're an older athlete. So you might only be down 200 calories a day. I'm making these numbers up, but that's enough to trigger these cascade effects in these younger athletes compared to the older athletes. And then they also just talk through, you know, absence of menstruation by the age of 14 or 15 years old. Those could be considered red flags. And looking at disordered eating history or disordered eating past in relation to all of this as well. And I just thought that was interesting to talk about because adolescents are really, you know, impacted by this.
Yeah, you think, like, I know we have parents that are listening. I know that we have young athletes that are listening. I know that we have coaches of high school and middle school teams that listen to this. And so immediately, I actually really like that they said, you know, basically young athletes, adolescent athletes don't have a protective quality to them, right? They don't have the bandwidth or the wiggle room to either intentionally or unintentionally underfuel, right? They are probably even more susceptible to unintentionally underfueling. They probably are also as or more receptive or, you know, like influenced by intentionally also as well underfueling, just given the, like, I don't know, the crises that is disordered eating in adolescent sports. You're highly influenced by your peers, et cetera. Maybe you aren't as independent yet. But I also think that that's interesting because it makes me think about how, as an adolescent, right, you're still growing, you're still developing, your body's energy needs in so many ways are greater, right? Like there's so many other things that are being established that I can see why basically like that balancing act of like what is homeostasis is a bit more tenuous, whereas I feel like as an older athlete, right, maybe your hormonal profile is a little bit more stable, a little bit more robust. You're done growing. You are at a stable, you know, your body has kind of found this happy place for the most part. Versus as a kid, right, you're putting on muscle mass, you're having, you know, hormonal changes in a big way. I think of the stress that puts on a young body versus kind of the robustness of a mature athlete, of a post-collegiate even athlete, right? Like I think that we think of collegiate athletes as adults because they're over 18, but like they're still babies. Like they are still growing and developing and maturing. And I mean, I stopped growing in 7th grade, but that is not the case for many people, men or women. And so I do like that they said, you know what, we are stating in this consensus statement, which sounds redundant, we are stating that we see this time period of like having a little bit more fragility, of having a little bit more receptivity to being out of whack. And we want to be aware of that and maybe not hypervigilant, but acknowledge that adolescent athletes are at higher risk from much smaller changes.
Yeah, and I think it puts into perspective too just how pervasive this issue is, and like it makes sense why it's pervasive if they have a less of a threshold, right? It's like easy to miss not that many calories per day when you're an athlete. You're busy. You're doing so many things. Yeah. So I really like that.
Yeah, and it's like you're like, I don't know, maybe your parents are helping you pack your lunch and you have no idea what you're supposed to, or maybe your parents are saying, hey, pack your lunch. And you're like, wow, a granola bar? Like, what do I need? You know, like it's your 14-year-old brain, your 17-year-old brain isn't like, I need 250 grams of carbs. You know, it's like, I like banana. I like Cocoa Puffs.
What's easy to pack.
Like,
totally. Yeah. So I really like that they call that out. One other part that they changed was, so the one thing that I find fascinating, so I'm going to back up really quickly and just remind everybody about the other consensus that comes out in this regard. So there's an IOC consensus through the International Olympic Committee that talks about something called REDS. It's relative energy deficiency in sport. And that kind of circles around this term called low energy availability. And the low energy availability is when you don't have the enough calories to meet your energy demands. It's kind of like what it means in a nutshell. And in that consensus, that low energy availability is the core, and then it branches out to all of these things, right? It can impact bone health and metabolic health and all of these things, psychological health, all of these things. That is kind of one camp. The Female Athlete Triad is another camp. I think they are kind of separate camps because they both take very strong stances. And in this paper specifically, the Female Athlete Triad group just really differentiates the way they talk about energy deficiency, trying to say that you can't just say low energy availability because there's no way to quantify it. And so they're trying to make a stance that you need to call it energy deficiency. And you can either measure that in the field, right, with a really hard way to measure calorie intake, which would be like measuring resting metabolic rate, measuring intake and outtake, energy burn, all that stuff. It's very hard to calculate that way. Or they've now added new parameters that act as surrogates based off the literature for low energy or energy deficit. And what these surrogates are is resting metabolic rate by itself. So when you start seeing drops in your resting metabolic rate, that's your body telling you that you're trying to conserve, right? It's not trying to burn a lot of calories when you're at rest because it's like, hey, we don't have enough calories to begin with. We're going to shut this down. So we're going to have a lower resting metabolic rate. That can act as a surrogate. Another thing that they quote in this paper as a surrogate for energy deficit is T3, which is your active form of thyroid hormone. So typically your thyroid gland, which is in your neck, produces T4 and T3, and T4 gets converted to T3, but basically T3 is like the active form that gets your metabolic rate up. It works on a lot of things, keeps your sex hormones regulating properly, keeps you having energy so you're not super tired all the time. And so they use that value as a surrogate as well for low energy or energy deficit. And then the last two they've used are IGF-1, which is basically a measure of anabolism, so your ability to build muscle or build, fitness, if you will. And if that is low, then your body's not able to build more because it's like, we can't build more right now. We don't have enough energy.
That makes a lot of sense, totally. Right? We say your body's job is to keep you alive. Mm-hmm. And if it says, hey, this environment is hostile and I don't have the energy, it's like, shut down that thing.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we're not going to build more muscle right now. We can't do that.
Which also makes sense when you think about how they're like, counterintuitively, when you actually feed an athlete more, they're more likely to have I'm using air quotes here, an ideal body comp, or like maintain a higher lean muscle mass, mm-hmm. or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, yeah, you can't do any of these things mm-hmm. if you don't have energy.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a really great point you just made. I'm going to come back to it after I finish this last point here. But the last thing they measure is ghrelin. Ghrelin is like your hormone that tells you you're hungry. And basically, if that level is up, again, all of this makes sense. Then your body's like, guys, give me some more food. What are we doing here? I'm hungry. So again, they use all these things kind of as a surrogate, right, for energy deficit, which I think is a great way to, think about energy deficit. Again, this is not a one size fits all. It doesn't mean if you come in and you're doing okay and you have a subclinical low T3, but that's it, and you feel great that you have, you're not in the triad. That's not what this means. It's more like a continuum. And it's saying if you come in and you have some of these criteria, but maybe we can't measure your total intake and outtake, but we see that you have an elevated ghrelin and a slightly decreased T3 along with these other symptoms, you might have the triad. And then looking at that final symptom bucket, the bone stress injuries, they added a kind of a criteria similar to the other consensus statement, basically saying you could have history of bone stress injury in a small bone, like a couple of those, or you could have history of one really big bone stress injury, which again, we've seen that before. The big bones really shouldn't be breaking. So oftentimes, if you do have a pelvic stress fracture or something like that, again, not every time, oftentimes, it could be due to low bone mineral density, which could be due to, low energy availability or energy deficit.
Yeah, like it's generally red flag, femurs, pelvis, sacrum, et cetera. It's like, ooh, like we got to evaluate some things here. And you can be kind of evaluated in or out of the energy deficit of what might be going on there. But it's definitely a larger red flag.
Yeah.
But same sort of thing. You're breaking your tibia over and over and over again. there's also something going on there that we should evaluate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I think the last thing that I wanted to touch on that you kind of reminded me of is BMI. So up until this model, BMI was a little more of an important criteria for diagnosing female athlete triad, which we all know how silly BMI is, right? And they add in a lot of these hormones instead, right? Because BMI is kind of under that energy availability bucket. And they add in all these hormones. They also add in composition. And so to your point previously, it's like, yeah, relying solely on BMI with an athlete is going to lead us to false conclusions, because the BMI might be normal, but potentially they're having these markers of low energy deficit, or potentially their composition is changing drastically because they're unable to create muscle mass because these low IGF-1 levels, these low growth hormone levels, because their body is in starvation mode. And so therefore their composition changes and they have maybe more fat mass than lean mass, but maybe their BMI doesn't change, right? And so they're just making this a more holistic picture so that we don't just pigeonhole someone based off their BMI and say, oh, your BMI is normal, then you therefore can't have the triad. It's like, oh, maybe it's normal. Let's check all these other things. And
yeah, because it goes both ways, right? It's like disordered eating or low energy availability or RED-S does not discriminate across size, nor does being really small mean that you have that either.
Yep.
Like I remember being told over and over and over again, if you were too lean, you'd lose your period. And it's like, well, no, you can be really lean and have your period, but again, it's all comes down to like, are you fueling yourself?
Yep.
Because that is, I mean, yeah, it's a very interesting, like, I like that we have some other measures or some other ways to think about it as opposed to like purely, I mean, it keeps people from getting into treatment for, for eating disorders if they've got a high or a normal BMI, because they're like, well, clearly you're fine. And it's like, that's not how this works. Yep. So totally. I like these updates.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really impressed with the updates too. And then the last section they added, and this is kind of why I brought this paper in, was that it was a section literally called life stressors or something like that. And so it basically just said, as the coach or the practitioner of an athlete, we really need to take into account life stressors or relationship stressors or financial stressors or pandemics or all of the things that can cause elevated cortisol in these athletes outside of their competition and training. And again, all of this seems like not like rocket science, right? But I like when it's added to the literature to remind people that we need to think about these things. And I think even though it sounds like very common sense to us, it's things that are easily forgotten by other people. So I think, again, just adding a section on it to remind people that there's other things that make the athlete stressed that may impact training that are not training is great.
Yeah, I just think it's important too, because this can be the thing that clicks for someone that can make them say, oh, okay, this is me, or, oh, this is my child, or this is my teammate, or this is my athlete. And that is valid. Even when we think the science is sometimes like, well, duh. Well, duh, science is still really important. It's the research that we give to people to bring into their doctors, to their mother-in-laws or their parents. I've had a few of those where I've had people being like, my mother-in-law says that I have to stop running if I'm going to have a kid. And I'm like, wrong. Here is the paperwork you can present to said mother-in-law. And I don't know. I mean, it's all the things, but it's important to have these updates, even if they don't feel massive, if they feel nominal. I guess, did you find that it helps it to eliminate previous confusion or answer questions that people might have had on like with the previous consensus statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think the entire section on energy availability or energy deficit is super helpful. And again, kind of gets rid of just using BMI as a surrogate or using the energy calculator as a surrogate and looking more into blood values that we can measure as like clinicians or even have clinicians order as the coach, right? So I think it definitely decreases confusion in that regard. And typically in this paper, the Female Athlete Triad Coalition are really big on drawing only recommendations that have been proven in other literature. And so they've, cited a lot of studies that have shown these relationships between, T3 or IGF-1 or ghrelin and resting metabolic rate and energy deficit. And so I just think, from a tangible perspective, this brings RED-S Female Athlete Triad, whatever you want to call it right now, more into a tangible perspective, because you can actually measure things and get quantitative data that will help you make an analysis of what's going on with your athlete, instead of just like, oh, like BMI, you look okay, all of these things are kind of arbitrary. No, we can actually get some data and make a conclusion that way. And I thought that was really helpful, and hopefully will give some guidance to physicians who see athletes. And maybe their stereotype is like, oh, you look healthy. It's like, well, let's use this paper to guide what kind of diagnostic testing we're going to do for this athlete to see if we can see what's going on.
Yeah, it gives them something to look at when they have a differential, right? It's like, okay, we do have steps that can allow us to move. Because a lot of these times diagnoses are a diagnosis of it like exclusion. It's like, well, if it's not, if all these things are not true, then you probably have X type of thing. So it's like they have to rule out stuff to rule you in at times. And this gives them, I think, a pretty good direction when it comes to evaluating what might be going on with an individual athlete, which is cool. Are you ready to talk about cortisol?
Let's do it.
I know you've been chomping at the bit this whole time.
I'll keep it high level, don't worry.
What is cortisol? Because as we said at the top, like a little bit of cortisol may be good, a lot of cortisol decidedly probably bad.
Yeah.
I was once told too that when you cry, cortisol is released in your tears. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I would like to believe that. So tell me more about cortisol.
I'm going to go ahead out on a limb and think that that's probably not the most true thing, but I don't want to squash your dreams. So, but yeah, so cortisol was created as like a protective hormone, right? It's like released when we're in times of stress so that we can respond to the stress. And it's a steroid hormone, and it's produced and synthesized by your adrenal glands. And your adrenal glands, in case you don't know what they are, which I'm sure a lot of people don't really know what they are, they're like these little hats that are on top of your kidneys. And that's all you really need to know. They secrete and they create cortisol, and they're triggered by your brain. So your brain might notice something that's alarming, or, it has a big test coming up, so it's really stressed. That's going to trigger those adrenal glands to release cortisol, which then can go and, wreak havoc on the body to prepare it for this state of stress.
But it also has like critical functions, right? It's not just this like big negative, like, oh my God, fight or flight hormone. It has like cortisol is part of like the balance of our internal ecosystem.
Totally. Yep. Yeah. And cortisol, to keep the list brief, can control stuff like glucose metabolism. It can control your blood pressure, your stress response, like I said before. It can control your sleep based off your circadian rhythm. And then it also plays a big role in inflammation. Again, your body's ability to like fight off intruders, fight off inflammation, or fight off infection and cause inflammation like swelling.
So it's mission critical to a number of things. And, like the balance there. We'll talk about, I guess, when it's like not dysregulated, but it's also like it's critical for kind of like what are they? They're not positive feedback loops, right? They're mostly negative feedback loops, where it's like it's involved in this kind of like constant balance of important parts of metabolism, important parts of other responses.
Yeah, totally. And I think like thinking of it from a athletic perspective or an athlete perspective,
like performance perspective.
Yeah, a performance perspective. There's a couple things that can increase cortisol. We'll get to those later. But for instance, like as an athlete, when you're doing a workout, your cortisol is going to go up. But cortisol in general, when it comes to athletic performance, can impact things that are very crucial to athletic performance. So it plays a role in your T3 levels. So what we discussed before, right? Thyroid hormone has a lot of things to do with your metabolism and all of these things, your fatigue. And so cortisol impacts that. So again, makes sense that cortisol would play a role in something like Female Athlete Triad, because it does play a role with thyroid. It also can increase your body's insulin resistance. So again, it controls your glucose metabolism. And so cortisol in general, if it's always elevated, can decrease your body's ability to respond to insulin, which, decreases your body's ability to uptake glucose, which glucose is amazing for endurance athletes. We need glucose to be able to move. We need to be able to store it as glycogen, as in our muscles and in our liver, so that we can pull it out later when we need it. And so, if that dynamic is kind of messed up, you can see how that could impact athletes in a negative way as well. Cortisol.
Yeah, what you guys are missing is Keely drew a really epic,
It's so
I don't even know what to
lame.
call it, a cloud chart. What is this? A bubble graph?
I'd say,
It's
yeah, bubble chart sounds great.
it's great. There's
Well,
a lot of things that are bubbles and then they all connect together in this kind of murder board style situation.
if you really want it, just send us a note. We'll send it to you.
But I do think that's like I think that's actually a great description of it, this like murder board of like how it's all interconnected, right? Like I struggled with anemia greatly. And luckily have had a very stable ferritin and iron for like the last 18 months almost at this point. I haven't needed an infusion in 2 years, I
Yeah.
think,
Nice.
which is wild. But part of that has been like I had really high cortisol for a really long time as well.
Yeah.
I was super dysregulated. And let me tell you what, iron metabolism is also a piece of
Yeah.
that puzzle. Like it
Yeah.
can make you feel really funky.
Yeah, it turns out like thyroid hormone and cortisol are impact your kidneys secretion of EPO, which EPO is like how you build new blood cells and how you make them, be able to carry oxygen and all of these things.
Yeah, they thought my blood cells were auto-lysing because they
Oh,
couldn't
man.
figure out why I was having this issue because it all started when I was incredibly overtrained. Like I am an odd case in which overtraining is really hard, under recovery is very easy. I was like that perfect case of like just absolute body chaos. But that's like when my like really random anemia started, in which like they were convinced my blood cells must be auto-lysing because there was no no reason for like my blood cell counts to be
Right.
how they were, with everything else in me being like basically totally fine.
Yeah, but then you didn't have a positive Coombs test, so they were like, oh, never mind, it's not autoimmune.
They looked at my poop and they were like, nope, not that.
Yeah, yeah. And then the final thing cortisol can impact too, and again, this is not going to shock anybody, but it's important to talk about, is your estrogen and testosterone levels. So again, cortisol, kind of like the middle of this cloud bubble, branches out, impacts a lot of things that are important for athletes.
And then obviously this is tied into, so you said tied into workouts, you get a cortisol response, and then it's also tied into life stress, stressful news, the world that we are very much living in. And I also think this makes me think too, and this is like a side tangent, right? Like our life has been stressful baseline with like work, life, career stuff. The world feels stressful with stuff going on in it, in which it's very scary for a lot of folks. And then I think about the people our indigenous runners, our brown and black runners who have been living in this like epigenetic stress response for generations.
Yeah.
Like the cortisol has to be wild.
Right. And so then how is that impacting, like for those who want to be in sport, how is that impacting their sporting performance? It's not helping. They're at a disadvantage from the get-go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we know that cortisol is important. It's in the middle of our murder board. It's connected on all the bubbles and all the things. Like the lines go all the ways. But it can obviously get out of control, and that can create what would be called dysregulation. And so like what are those, like kind of like we mentioned anemia being one, we mentioned insulin resistance.
Yep.
Like what other things might, when we see it super dysregulated, how does that show up in people and athletes?
Yeah. So yeah, we talked about all the things you just touched on. Other ways it can show up, and I think I'll break this out now into the acute versus chronic, just because I think that'll help level set a little bit. So acute increases in cortisol are normal. Those could happen from a workout. Those could happen from a stressful piece of news you got in the morning. Those will increase for a little bit, and then they'll go back down. And they'll go back to normal. And your rhythm of cortisol will not be impacted throughout the whole day, right? That's just how cortisol normally works. But sometimes you can have chronic stress, which if it's over, around a week or a month, then you're just going to have chronically elevated cortisol. And typically when cortisol is chronically elevated, then we're seeing like your response to stress or exercise could be over dramatized. We could start seeing things like the anemia. We can see impaired muscle synthesis because, again, we talked about in the Female Athlete Triad, IGF-1 and growth hormone are also regulated by increased cortisol. They could be decreased. So all of a sudden, your body's ability to create new muscles or build muscle based off your training could go down. We also see your body's glycogen stores go down. So again, glycogen is the storage form of glucose. When you're running for a really long time, your body needs to be able to take that glycogen from your muscles and turn it into sugar so that you can keep going. So if you have kind of an impaired glycogen store, you might get tired a lot easier, right? You might wonder why all of a sudden an hour into your run or 2 hours into your run, you feel like crap. that could all kind of be playing a role here. Another one thing is impaired sleep. That makes sense, right? Cortisol is kind of on a circadian rhythm with your body. So if that is super impaired, you might be triggered to fall asleep at weird times or wake up at weird times. And then the final thing would be, again, touching back to the Female Athlete Triad paper, cortisol again impacts leptin and ghrelin. Ghrelin is your hungry hormone. So you might see increased ghrelin levels. You might feel really hungry. You might feel less satiated. So you really just feel like kind of hangry all the time. These are not fun things. And then eventually there's a thing that can happen where, because of the negative feedback with cortisol being high all the time, it actually can drop because your body's like, okay, this is too much. I need to downregulate all of these things, right? I can't continually break down my body and do all of these things because cortisol is always high. And so eventually you could even see a little bit of a de-elevation of cortisol where it's more normal or lower than normal. And this could eventually result in just more like a deep fatigue, lack of motivation, again, poor sleep. And so that's something to worry about
burnout
too.
Almost.
Yeah, kind
too,
of.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That like emotional burnout. So I guess given all of that, given what we know can be the fallout, how it can show up in our legs, I don't know why I call it pizza legs because I love pizza and I eat pizza and I feel fine after it. But there's like this sensation that I call pizza legs where it's like when I've had a big stressful thing occur, I've tried to go for a run and I was like, wow, all of the energy has left my body.
Yep.
Like there is, I'm going to go sit on a rock and cry probably because nothing is happening here. So I wonder like besides sitting on a rock and crying, which I do recommend highly, it's therapeutic. It can really check a lot of boxes for you. But outside of that recommendation, how can athletes think about training during times of high stress and just kind of managing what that might look like?
Yeah. And I think this was why I wanted to talk about this from the very beginning, right? So that we could give our listeners and some athletes just some tips on how to deal with how they're feeling right now. If you're feeling afraid for your ability to go out and run and you're high stress all the time or you're stressed about something, cut yourself some slack to begin with, right? Sit on the rock and cry if you really need to. Like stress is stress, just like you guys talked about last week. But I've been having this conversation with some of my friends who maybe have a lot of life stress going on right now too. Probably don't try to do a VO2 max workout, right? Because your cortisol levels are starting high. And when you do really high interval training, your cortisol is going to also go high. So if you're starting with this higher cortisol because your life's really stressful and the world is uncertain and all of these things are going on right now, then let's do more like threshold workout and not try to elevate that cortisol very much and give yourself some grace and not try to do something that's going to be almost impossible. And that is okay. You can maintain fitness. You can build fitness by doing work that is not that hard. That's going to allow you to actually be able to like complete the workout, feel good about the workout, and not dig yourself even deeper into a hole. Another thing that could be something to add to the repertoire, and we are no like strangers to this advice because we give this advice all the time, but if you need another reason to increase carbs a little bit, it could be really helpful during these kind of times because if you are, really stressed and cortisol is high, you might have a little bit of impaired glycogen storage, especially in the muscles. And so you might just want to up those carbs a little bit the days before bigger runs, make sure to replenish after the run, maybe increase your carbs during the run a little bit, and just really be mindful that you're working a little bit at a deficit. And so it's okay to increase those carbohydrates during these really stressful times so that you're able to, get your run in, get your stress release in, and finish them feeling good.
I like that. We put out like a kind of an emergency pod across the Feisty media ecosystem. When everything was really like heating up in Minneapolis in a big way. And Erin Elia, who's the host of the Women's Performance podcast on Feisty, hosted it she's a psychologist, lives in Minneapolis. She hosted it with a number of other kind of psych specialists two of whom were immigrants, also one of whom is based also in Minneapolis, I believe. And they talked about how, she's like, I've been walking this week. Like I can't, running is too much. Like I have been walking. And it's like listening to that and listening to what you need in that moment goes a long way. Get a lot of sleep, hydrate. It's kind of like you're sick. Get a lot of sleep, hydrate well, maybe take in a little extra protein. It's like fuel yourself, nurture yourself, take care of yourself, is advice for any type of life stress, but I think it's particularly pertinent in times like this.
Yeah. Science aside, like, just listen to kind of what your body needs and don't try to fight it, because the science is there to show that it is really impossible to do these things during these chronically elevated, stressful times. And so, yeah, give yourself some slack for sure. And yeah, if that means sitting on a rock, that's okay. If that means walking, that's also okay. And if you want to go do a workout, that's great too, but give yourself some grace.
Yeah, like workouts can be very cathartic. I've definitely needed those as well. I just needed to go hurt in the woods a little bit. That's the Nordic skier in me. But I do think it's important to again, as you mentioned, listen to your body. Maybe you're taking us on a walk this week instead of a run.
That's fine.
That's okay, as long as you bring a snack with you.
Yeah, we will still harp on you to have the snack.
You still must eat your snack. Yeah, I'm glad that we touched on. I just want to give another shout out to the women over at Feisty Media before we do our Society Slam and close things down. We've this has been such an awesome kickoff 2026. You can follow them at feisty_media on Instagram and over at feisty.co online. We're one of 6 podcasts, I believe, and we're kind of their run vertical, but they do so many cool things, following their Olympic coverage has been amazing. They're pulling out stories that I've completely missed, things I want to cheer for. So if you haven't yet, go give them a follow over on Instagram at feisty_media. Are you ready for this slam?
I love this slam. So yeah, let's do it.
This was really sweet. It actually ended up in our hidden requests, and it was flagged for words that you don't like. And then I read it. I was like, what words don't I like in this? I like all of it.
Yeah, you're like, wait, what?
But they wrote, I love that Lindsey Vonn is still competing, but also a little bummed that we are glorifying pushing through a major injury. I understand her choice. And again, choice is important here, especially given that this may be her last opportunity, but sad of the perpetuation of pushing through injury is a great option, especially as someone is seemingly always fighting an injury. Interested on your takes on this. And we had a great exchange back and forth about the context of this Olympic moment and what that means and yada, yada, yada. And it was this awesome conversation, but I'm wondering kind of what your initial takes were on I feel like it's the Lindsey Vonn controversy, which isn't fair to her or anyone else, but what your kind of takes were of her, I guess, lining up with a ruptured ACL, and then what that also meant in the fact that she, people are opinionated about her crashing in the downhill event as well.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot this week and how I feel about it, because I think it's a very hard situation. And I can see both sides of deciding to line up with this. I think it reminded me a lot of our conversation about Pauline during the Tour de France Femmes, where she had knowingly dropped a lot of weight with the guidance of doctors in order to, try to win the Tour. I think in the case of Lindsey Vonn, while glorifying pushing through an injury is very controversial, and it's interesting, right, for the psyche of a lot of athletes. I think in this case, given that she's been in the sport for, over a decade, she's a grown woman, she knows the risks associated with skiing with no ACL, that I think she's very capable of making the decision to decide to try and ski in the Olympics for her final Olympics. And I think we have to be okay with that, because, again, kind of like the Pauline thing where we were saying, as long as she was given access to the potential risks of her decision, I am totally on board with her deciding that she wants this more than the potential negative consequences. And now if she was not told this, then I would have a problem with it, because then she's deciding to do something without all of the information. But if she was given these risks and she's knowing these risks and she's willing to take them, that is just kind of part of competitive Olympic caliber sport. And as someone who also has dealt with a lot of major injuries and have chosen to not do that sometimes, I can see why this would be triggering. But I think, again, we're all weighing our positives and negatives of these potential outcomes. And I think we have to appreciate that she decided this way based off what she was given, right? And that we are allowed to decide differently based off our own weighing of these ups and downs, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's this idea too of context is key. And it's maybe you make a different decision if this happens during the World Cup season and not in a championship year, not in an Olympic year, not when you're 25 versus 41. There's a lot of context at play here. And Carolyn Galik wrote a really interesting little Instagram post that I'm going to read here because I think it's really powerful. I was watching the men's downhill replay yesterday, and like one of the early leaders was this Austrian guy. This is not from Carolyn's post. It was an Austrian guy who crashed during a training run this week and hit his head like face so hard that one of his eyes was basically swollen shut. And they weren't like, oh, he shouldn't race. He can't see well while he goes 90 miles an hour down like one of the bumpiest courses in downhill history. So no one was giving him a hard time about not being able to see out of one eyeball, which is kind of important for skiing downhill really fast. So there's a double standard here. And so Carolyn goes to say, today while competing at the Olympics with a torn ACL, Lindsey Vonn crashed, broke her leg, and was airlifted off the mountain. The headlines exploded. Spoiler alert. They tell us more about how society views women athletes than the injury itself. We still have a long ways to go. No matter what a woman athlete does, it's wrong. If she's injured, she's irresponsible. If she withdraws, she's weak. If she's 25, she's unproven. If she's 40, she's finished. If she competes while injured, she's reckless, too bold, too old, too ambitious, too intense. There is no right amount of ambition for a woman. We don't dissect men's ambition like this. We celebrate it. When men push through pain, it's grit. When women do, it's questioned. The double standard isn't subtle. Elite mountain athletes don't guess at risk. We calculate it. With doctors, coaches, data, with years of lived experience. Taking risks is part of being a professional mountain athlete. Calling women reckless for choosing to compete strips them of something simple: autonomy, the right to assess risk, the right to try, the right to fail, the right to show up. Maybe the discomfort isn't the injury. Maybe it's women refusing to shrink. And I'm just like,
yeah, it's very well written.
We're 65 minutes into the podcast and it gave me the shivers. But I just like, I think it's this idea, right, of like there is a double standard. We don't question men's abilities to make decisions for themselves, but we do sure as heck question women's abilities to make decisions. And it continues to perpetuate in sports in a way, which I think is, unfair to female competitors across sporting discipline. And I thought Carolyn just did a really good job summarizing what so many of us, I think, have felt over our own careers or when watching and absorbing this information being said about athletes around us. Carolyn's a woman who tore her ACL and decided, she's supposed to climb Everest that spring. And she was like, you know what? Like, I'm strong enough. I've been cleared to do this. I'm going to wait until after Everest to get my ACL repaired. Because that is the best time course for me.
Yeah.
So I think it's like this interesting thing where it's like they were briefed of the risks.
Yep.
They are working with amazing teams. They know their bodies.
Yep.
Like they know when it's okay to push and when they need to pull back. And that is, I think, what experience and wisdom and being an elite level athlete brings you.
For sure. Yeah. I think just on the other hand is that it is your choice. So I think we can praise that someone decided to try and to push and to take that risk. But I think to this, question's point, that doesn't have to be your decision, and it's okay if it's not as well, because I've been there, the year I dislocated my shoulder at States, I had a decision to make. Do I want to be the person who walks across the finish line with a sling on, or do I want to just call it? Because that's where I was feeling that, do I want to call it and just be done? And I chose to call it because I was like, the risks of this do not outweigh my ego, do not outweigh my goals, do not outweigh my longevity. And so, you get to decide. And so I think if you're fighting an injury and this is triggering to you, that's okay. That is totally normal. And don't let that make you think that you need to push through when your outcomes, maybe they are more important than the risk of doing it, right? And so just have your own weights.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And I think it's there's a decision you would make in an Olympic setting that you wouldn't make maybe in a normal World Cup setting or an average day setting. And there's a difference even in is this my last Western States ever?
Right.
Or is this you know what? I don't need to walk this one in type of thing. And that is, that's the question of every DNF, right? Is this do I want to walk this in? Is this how I cap off my whatever X experience, or is it not worth it for me? And that is it is that DNF question, which always feels hard and always feels like you're making the wrong decision, even when it's the right decision. So I don't know. I'm just the Olympics is full of inspiration, and I think Lindsey Vonn is part of that narrative too.
Yep.
But I guess let us know what you think. Tell us we're wrong. Slide into our DMs. Give us some society slams to talk about in future episodes. We'd love a controversy. So get over there. Trail Society on Instagram. And I guess until next time, we'll catch you out on the trails.